Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Magical Musketeer deck profiles. I'm really excited for this because it's actually a Patreon request deck profile for Awalt. So Awalt wanted to see my absolutely insane Magical Musketeer deck. This is a deck that I carry with me every single time I go to a locals or any sort of event that you're going to be dueling at, and it's a really amazing deck. It's basically hand traps the deck, but it has so many really good cards in the archetype that I absolutely love the way the deck plays. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description in a single video, getting a signed card to the mail, and even getting your requested deck profile every single month you're a patron along with test hands. And definitely give Awalt some love down in the comments down below. So without further ado guys, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Magical Musketeer Caspar. So Magical Musketeer Caspar has a very, very awesome effect and shares the in-archetype effect that every single one of your Magical Musketeer monsters shares. That during either player's turn, you can activate a Magical Musketeer spell or trap from your hand. Basically, makes your entire hand of all your Magical Musketeer spells and traps hand traps, which is really awesome. It also has the ability that if a spell or trap is activated in this card's column, then you get to add a Magical Musketeer card from your deck to your hand, but not with the same name as the card activated, which is really awesome. So basically the way this deck works is if you have this card in like column 3, which is like right here in the middle of the board, and you activate a copy of Desperado under it to pop a card, you can actually add a Magical Musketeer spell or trap from your deck to your hand, or a Magical Musketeer monster, which is really good. But it also works against your opponent as well, because if you have this card in column 3 and your opponent activates a spell or trap in this card's column, then its effect will go off as well. So your opponent kind of has to watch out where you're playing as you play this deck, which adds a whole new element to the game, which is really, really cool. We then play 3 copies of Magical Musketeer Starfire. If a spell or trap is activated in this card's column, then you get to add, or you can special summon a level 4 or lower Magical Musketeer monster from your deck in defense position, which is really good and usually going to be your copy of your Caspar that you're going to be special summoning all the time off this effect. We then play 3 copies of Magical Musketeer Kid Brave. When this card is on your field and a spell or trap is activated in this card's column, you get to discard a Magical Musketeer card from your hand, and then you get to draw 2 cards, which is really helpful to help you replenish your hand a little bit. We played 2 copies of Doc. Doc is really good because if a spell or trap is activated in his column, then you get to add a Magical Musketeer card from your graveyard to your hand, which is really helpful. We have a single copy of Calamity. She's basically walking Monster Reborn. If a card is sent to the graveyard, or if this card's on the field and a spell or trap is activated in this card's column, you get to special summon a Magical Musketeer from your graveyard, which is really cool in defense position. We play 1 copy of Wild. Wild is really good because if a spell or trap is activated in his column, then you get to shuffle 3 Magical Musketeer cards from your graveyard into your deck, and then you get to draw a card, which helps you recur a lot of your different plays in this particular deck, especially if you have multiples of like Desperado, copies of Caspar, and stuff like that. You can basically just send them back to the deck and then draw a card, which helps out to go into grind games. We then play 3 copies of Ash Blossom, because Ash Blossom just stops your opponent from all sorts of shenanigans from touching the deck, which is really helpful for this particular deck to just stop them from doing that. Gives you an additional negate, which is really, really nice. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is super helpful in this particular deck because it's going to help you get your Magical Musketeers back on your field and help you link climb as well by taking your opponent's monsters out of their graveyard and putting them on your side of the field. And remember, as you activate your spells and traps, if you activate them under a Magical Musketeer, their effects will go off once per turn. So this card can actually be a Monster Reborn, and a search as well if you have it under Caspar. But a single copy of Upstart Goblin, kind of the same reason. If you activate this under a card, it's going to make your Magical Musketeers go off, and you get to draw a card, and your opponent gains 1,000 life points, which really isn't that much, but making a 39 card deck really helps out. 1 copy of Called by the Grave. Called by the Grave helps out a lot in this deck because basically this card is going to stop any hand trap that your opponent has. This card helps out a lot in the deck, especially if you use Caspar and then you have a copy of like Starfire on the field. You can actually activate this under a Magical Musketeers monster to be able to negate a hand trap and then be able to search, special summon, draw cards, revive something, swing, and do stuff with your Magical Musketeer monsters. Play a single copy of Double or Nothing. Double or Nothing is super helpful in this deck because basically what this card is going to do is you're going to add it from deck to hand when you summon your Utopia Double by detaching a material, summoning double, or summoning a copy of Utopia on top of your Utopia Double. It'll go to 5,000. You can then attack your opponent with the Utopia, detach a material, negate the attack, drop Double or Nothing, and then it goes to 10,000 on the swing, but it can't attack directly. It can swing into a monster, which is really awesome as a 10,000 beat stick. So you can get a really powerful monster on the field with this particular card that can potentially OTK your opponent with one attack. We then play a single copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. Harpy's Feather Duster is really helpful to just blow back row against your opponent. We play 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. Cosmic Cyclone is a card that I just really don't like back row in this deck. So I play the Harpy's Feather Duster and the copies of the Cosmic Cyclones. This card is really helpful because you pay 1,000 and then target a spell or trap on the field and banish it. This card really helps out when you're playing against stuff like Eldritch or spells or traps that go to the graveyard and then activate effects. We then play 2 copies of Potted Desires. Potted Desires is not really a single card in this deck that if I banish that I'm going to be like, oh no, I've lost the game. So I play this card as a 2 of in this deck. Just to help me get kind of like 2 extra cards in the hand, which is really nice. This card helps out a lot, especially with like when you don't have a monster in hand, but this actually activates a lot of your Magical Musketeer's monsters effects, and it gets you a draw 2 as well, which is really helpful. The only card that you really don't want to banish is actually Double or Nothing, but for some reason when I play this deck, I never hit it. So it's not that big a deal. And plus you play Utopia the Lightning in the extra deck, so even if you do, you have another play. We then play 3 copies of Cross Domination. Cross Domination is insanely good for Magical Musketeers. It has the ability, if you control a Magical Musketeer, you can target a face-up monster opponent's side of the field, negate its effects, and drop its attack and defense to 0, which is really helpful for this deck to be able to drop an opponent's monster to 0, because a lot of your Magical Musketeers have low attack points. The highest is 1,700. So this card helps out a lot to help you go through certain cards, and it's just a really awesome card in this particular deck. We then play 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More because it turns off all of your opponent's monsters' effects on their side of the field, which helps out a lot. They don't take any damage, but you can kind of work around that a little bit to be able to just kind of break their board if you need to. So this card actually helps out a lot to be able to just go into a lot of plays in this particular deck. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing a single copy of Fiendish Steel. Fiendish Steel is a really good card because basically it lets your Magical Musketeers not be able to be destroyed by card effects. And if this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you get to add a Magical Musketeer card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, which is really helpful for this particular deck to just be able to grab those particular cards from your deck or your graveyard. We then play a single copy of Crooked Crown, which lets us special summon a Magical Musketeer to our side of the field, which is really, really helpful. And if the opponent's column is unused in the monster zone that you special summon this card to, or that you special summon the Magical Musketeer to, then that column cannot be used until the end of the turn. But the only thing that you kind of got to watch out about this is they are continuous, so they can kind of lock down that particular Magical Musketeer that they're under, because you can't activate any spells or traps under those cards. So they're really powerful effects, but you kind of got to watch out a little bit with these 2 cards. We then play 2 copies of Needle Dancing with cards running around now that are basically just going, hey, or cards in the graveyard, like decks that play from grave. Like a lot of those cards are just going to be like dealt with this card because you can banish literally 3 cards from the graveyard off this effect. It is kind of a -1, but it really does help out a lot to banish certain cards and get them out of the graveyard, because a lot of decks that are just playing from the graveyard, you're just like, hey, I'm going to banish all your problematic cards from the graveyard that you needed, and now I have like everything I need out of the way to go into plays. We then play 2 copies of Last Stand. Last Stand's really good because when your opponent activates a spell or trap, this card can negate it instantly, which is really, really good for this particular deck. And then we play 3 copies of Desperado because Desperado is ridiculously good. It's probably one of my favorite cards in the entire deck. If you control a Magical Musketeer, you can target a face-up card on the field and destroy it. Now, it seems like it's not that great. It just goes 1 for 1, right? But when you start recurring this card over and over and over again to pop cards on the field over and over and over again, this card gets to be pretty insane. I absolutely love this card in the deck, and it is one of the best cards. This card and Cross Domination are the 2 best cards in the entire deck besides your normal summons of Caspar and Starfire. So that's it for the traps, guys, and the main deck. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Magical Musketeer Max. This card is absolutely insane, and one of the main reasons I play this deck so much now, because it has one of the craziest effects I've ever seen on a Link monster. It has the ability that it just takes any one of your Magical Musketeers to link into this card. Literally any single one. And then it has the ability that you get to add Magical Musket spells or traps with different names from your deck to your hand up to the number of monsters your opponent controls. So if your opponent controls like 5 monsters, you get to add 5 Magical Musketeer spells or traps from your deck to your hand off this effect. And it doesn't end there. If they don't have any back row and you link summon this card, and you want to use the monster effect, you can special summon Magical Musketeer, or if they have back row, you have the ability to special summon Magical Musketeer monsters with different names from your deck up to the number of spells or traps your opponent currently controls. If they control 5 monsters, or if they control 5 spells and traps, you get either 5 searches off the, this is ideal, but you get 5 searches off this particular card, which is really good. Even if you get like 1 or 2 searches, or 1 or 2 special summons, it's just going to help you out a lot with this particular deck with this card. And it's a Link 1 as well, which is really, really good. We then play a single copy of Access Code Talker. Access Code Talker is just going to help you pop cards on the field. It's a really good card for this particular deck. It could be a Boral load if you want to build this deck on a budget, but this card is really helpful just to be able to pop cards on the field and get you a really big beat stick. We play a single copy of Boral Sword as well to help you OTK, which is really helpful for this particular deck. 1 copy of Unicorn to spin stuff, Phoenix to pop spells and traps, Cerberus to pop monsters. We play a single copy of Pentastag as well. Pentastag is going to give the monster that it points to piercing damage, which is really cool. 1 copy of IP Masquerena because you can go into your copy of your Unicorn during your opponent's turn. 1 copy of Utopia because you use this card to go into this card with Utopia Double. Utopia Double is really, really good to help you get a 10,000 beat stick on the field. Utopia the Lightning, just in case you banish that copy of your Double or Nothing, which is for some reason really rare when I play this deck. 1 copy of Fortune Tune. Fortune Tune has the ability that it can't be destroyed by battle, which is really cool because during the standby phase you gain 500 life points, and this card cannot be targeted by card effects. And if this phase a card would be destroyed, then you can detach a material from this card instead, which is really helpful just to be able to use this card to be able to go into something like a copy of Downward Magician, which then can let you climb into a copy of Zeus, which Zeus is really good in this particular deck. You don't have to play the Zeus. If you don't want to, you can play Break Sword if you want to go for a little bit more of a budget option, but this card does help out a lot to just make this card, make a copy of number 41, and then make a copy of Downward Magician during main phase 2, and then finally make a copy of Zeus to go in during main phase 2 to then board wipe if you need to. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoy it. It's a really awesome deck. I really love this deck, and I'm really glad that Awalt actually requested this one because it is literally one of my favorite decks of all time. Like this, Blackwings and Necros, like that's my decks that I play all the time. And I really love the way that this deck turned out because it's really fun. Like, I hope you guys give this deck a try. It's not too expensive either. Like, the majority of the stuff has been reprinted except for Cross Domination. And so it's a fairly cheap deck to pick up. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much, Awalt, for requesting this one. This one was absolutely a blast to build and a lot of fun to profile and do the test hands of, which you guys should check out the test hands when those drop on the channel. And we'll see you guys in the next videos. See you later, guys.